Sometimes it feels like Marilyn Monroe and Madonna weren't just icons separated by decades, but like sisters born into different eras. One rose from the smoky golden haze of 1950s Hollywood, the other exploded into the neon-drenched chaos of the 1980s music scene. And yet, when I look at their lives side by side, I can't help but feel an eerie sense of déjà vu. It's as if Madonna picked up the blueprint Marilyn left behind and ran with it, rewriting the ending. When I first started noticing these similarities, I honestly thought I was overreaching. After all, every star has influences, and pop culture constantly borrows from itself. But the deeper I looked, the more unsettling it became. These weren't just surface-level tributes. They were uncanny repetitions, like echoes traveling across time. 17 parallels stood out to me, and as I pieced them together, I realized we're not just talking about inspiration. We're talking about almost identical arcs playing out in two very different eras. Today, I want to take you through 17 uncanny parallels between Marilyn Monroe and Madonna that make me wonder if history doesn't just repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes in the most haunting ways. And as we go through them, ask yourself, are these coincidences, or was Madonna consciously walking in Marilyn's footsteps to finish the story Marilyn never could? What strikes me most is that both Marilyn and Madonna weren't just women trying to make it in entertainment. They were visionaries, consciously, or maybe unconsciously, tapping into archetypes that the public couldn't resist. Marilyn's era needed a fantasy that distracted from post-war realities, while Madonna's world demanded rebellion in the face of conservatism. And in both cases, they gave people exactly what they craved, while sacrificing parts of themselves in the process. I never thought I'd put them side by side in this way, but once you see these parallels, it's impossible to unsee them. This isn't just about a few photos or videos, it's about entire lives unfolding in uncanny synchronicity. So, let's go deeper, because what comes next will leave you questioning just how much of pop culture is coincidence, and how much is history repeating itself in a new disguise. The first parallel that stopped me in my tracks is the brunette-to-blonde transformation. Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean Mortensen, started out as a brunette. In her earliest modeling photos, you can still see the shy brown-haired girl with soft curls. Hollywood executives told her bluntly, if she wanted to stand out, she had to bleach her hair platinum blonde. That single decision turned her into the Marilyn the world remembers, a shimmering bombshell who redefined the idea of beauty in the 1950s. And decades later, Madonna Ciccone made the exact same move. She arrived in New York with brown hair, hustling as a dancer and club kid. But once she started to break into music, she embraced the peroxide blonde look. It wasn't just hair dye, it was a career-altering strategy. Both women understood that being blonde wasn't just beauty, blonde was branding. The transformation was deliberate, calculated, and weaponized for fame. But here's where it gets even stranger. Both of them faced nearly identical industry pressure when it came to hair. Marilyn's studio contracts demanded she keep her locks perfectly light and glossy, while Madonna's managers and stylists insisted that the blonde image was her ticket to mainstream dominance. It wasn't just a preference, it was practically a clause in their careers. And both women paid the price, enduring the damage of constant peroxide treatments, hiding roots between appearances, and carrying the burden of maintaining an image that wasn't entirely natural. And as if that wasn't enough, both women were pushed into identical beauty formulas. The winged eyeliner, the striking red lips, and even the beauty mark placement. It's chilling when you realize that what we now call the Marilyn look was recreated decades later as the Madonna look, down to the smallest details. Sometimes I wonder, was Madonna consciously stepping into Marilyn's silhouette? Or was the industry so determined to recycle what worked that it molded her in the same image? When I first saw early pictures of Norma Jean compared to Madonna's early New York club days, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was looking at two versions of the same story. Both had managers, stylists, and executives pushing them toward this blonde image as if it was some kind of secret key to immortality. And strangely enough, they were right. Neither woman became globally iconic until the transformation was complete, but the cost was enormous. Marilyn often spoke about how being blonde made people underestimate her intelligence, trapping her in roles that emphasized her looks rather than her talent. Madonna faced a similar paradox. Critics dismissed her as a shallow image chaser long before they recognized her as one of the sharpest businesswomen in music. It makes me wonder, was the blonde hair a crown, or was it a cage? But appearance was only the beginning. Another parallel lies in their voices, the artificial breathy tones that became trademarks. Marilyn's voice in films wasn't her natural speaking style, it was an engineered persona, soft, airy, and childlike. that producers demanded she use to project both innocence and seduction. She once admitted she was told to act like a child but look like a woman, and her voice was designed to embody that contradiction. Madonna, in turn, shaped her singing voice and interviews with that same calculated airiness. Sometimes I listen back to her early records and think, this isn't the raw Madonna from Michigan. This is a constructed Marilyn-esque illusion, purposefully masking the real personality underneath. Even in interviews, she would deliberately adjust her tone, softer, flirtier, almost as if she was echoing Marilyn's style. And that leads directly to another eerie similarity. Both women built public identities that were almost entirely artificial shields. For Marilyn, Norma Jean was hidden behind a carefully maintained fantasy. For Madonna, the gritty, ambitious, street-smart artist disappeared behind the blonde provocateur the media loved to dissect. Both women lived double lives, persona versus reality. And in both cases, the mask was often more famous than the person wearing it. What struck me most is how these voices, these personas, became prisons. Fans adored the characters, but rarely the women behind them. In their own ways, both Marilyn and Madonna became trapped in the cages they themselves helped construct. And it makes me wonder, how much of what we think we know about them was ever truly real? What really fascinates me is that both women reportedly disliked the voices that made them famous. Marilyn sometimes dropped her breathy act in private, revealing a much stronger, sharper tone that stunned those close to her. Madonna, too, has moments, especially in live performances, where her natural toughness cuts through, and you realize the breathiness was part of the character she was selling. I never thought much about celebrity voices until I compared these two, but it hit me. Even sound can be manufactured, just like hair or makeup. And both Marilyn and Madonna proved that controlling even the smallest detail, like how you breathe out a sentence, could change the trajectory of your career. But it also meant that their true selves were constantly hidden beneath layers of performance. If the hair, makeup, and voice didn't convince me, the homages certainly did. Madonna didn't just vaguely reference Marilyn, she recreated her directly. Her Material Girl music video is a shot-for-shot homage to Monroe's legendary performance of Demons Are a Girl's Best Friend. The same pink satin dress, the same men in tuxedos, the same choreography. It wasn't subtle. It was Madonna saying outright, I am the new Marilyn. And what fascinates me is that even the designer connection stayed intact. William Travilla, the man who designed Marilyn's original pink dress, was the one whose work Madonna's version was modeled on. It wasn't just tribute, it was lineage. And years later, Madonna went even further, stepping into Marilyn's tragic narrative itself. In 2021, Madonna posed for V magazine in a recreation of Marilyn's infamous Last Sitting photo shoot, the final images taken before her death. The sets were nearly identical. The bedroom, the sheets, even the vulnerable expressions. Seeing those pictures felt like déjà vu turned unsettling. It was no longer just homage. It was Madonna deliberately stepping into Marilyn's final chapter, blurring the lines between tribute and possession. Some people called it tasteless. Others called it genius. But for me, it was just another reminder of how deeply intertwined these two women's stories have become. Madonna wasn't just inspired by Marilyn. She was rewriting her scenes one by one. When I first watched Material Girl after rewatching Marilyn's Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, I was floored by how deliberate the recreation was. It wasn't inspiration, it was inheritance. Madonna wasn't saying, I admire Marilyn. She was saying, I am Marilyn now, in this generation. And the 2021 V magazine shoot took that even further. Many critics called it disturbing, arguing Madonna was exploiting Marilyn's death, but others suggested it was Madonna's way of keeping Marilyn's image alive, dragging her ghost into the present. I couldn't decide which it was. But one thing was certain, Madonna knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted us to talk about Marilyn all over again, through her. Parallels didn't stop at image, they extended into dangerous proximity with power. Marilyn Monroe is forever tied to the Kennedy family through her alleged affair with President John F. Kennedy and the whispers of entanglements with Robert Kennedy. Decades later, Madonna found herself linked to JFK's son, John F. Kennedy Jr. They reportedly dated briefly in the 1980s, creating headlines that echoed Marilyn's shadow. It's hard not to see the symmetry. Both women, at the peak of their careers, circling America's most famous political dynasty, and both faced battles with industry control at the exact same time. Marilyn was under the thumb of Hollywood studios, who dictated every aspect of her career until she finally rebelled, forming her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, to seize creative control. It was revolutionary at the time. No actress had dared to challenge the studios in that way. Madonna fought a parallel war in the music industry, pushing back against label control and demanding ownership of her music, image, and tours. From renegotiating contracts to launching Maverick Records, Madonna was essentially doing what Marilyn had tried to do, only in a different medium. Both women knew the feeling of being controlled like property, and both staged daring rebellions to reclaim their autonomy. In Marilyn's time, rebellion was punished with isolation and smear campaigns. In Madonna's era, rebellion turned her into a mogul. The outcomes were different, but the battles were nearly identical, and it proves just how far ahead of her time Marilyn truly was. The Kennedy connection almost feels scripted, like some cosmic irony. Marilyn allegedly sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" in that unforgettable dress, cementing the rumors of her intimacy with JFK. Madonna, meanwhile, posed on magazine covers with JFK Jr. and reportedly dated him, sparking headlines that practically begged for the Monroe comparison. I remember reading an article at the time that said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but in Madonna's case, it sure seems to." And when it comes to industry control, the similarities deepen. Marilyn's rebellion against Fox was unprecedented. She wanted better roles, better pay, and creative freedom. Madonna, 4 decades later, fought Warner Brothers over her contracts, eventually forming Maverick Records and building one of the first female-owned empires in pop. Both women stood up to institutions designed to control them, and in doing so, they changed the rules forever. Their iconic status also unfolded in uncannily similar ways. Marilyn was the definitive sex symbol of the 1950s, embodying an era's conflicted views on femininity. She was adored and objectified at the same time, caught between being the ultimate fantasy and the ultimate cautionary tale. Madonna, decades later, became the definitive provocateur of the 1980s, pushing boundaries of sexuality, religion, and art. 2 different decades, 2 different industries. Yet both became the single most controversial figure of their time. And controversy wasn't an accident, it was a strategy. Marilyn leaned into scandal, from risque photo shoots to suggestive roles, knowing the gossip kept her relevant. Madonna perfected this same playbook, deliberately sparking outrage, whether it was writhing on stage in a wedding dress or challenging the Vatican with provocative imagery. Both women understood controversy wasn't the price of fame, it was the engine that fueled it. Every time they were condemned, their power only grew. And looking back, it's astonishing how both of them weaponized outrage as currency. If Marilyn shocked people by lifting a skirt in the 7-Year Itch, Madonna shocked people by simulating desire on stage. Different acts, same goal: stay unforgettable. And both succeeded beyond measure. When I think about controversy as a career strategy, I can't ignore how intentional both women were. Marilyn's so-called accidental dress mishaps were usually carefully staged studio stunts. Madonna's Like a Prayer controversy with Pepsi was no accident either. It was a calculated move that turned a canceled ad campaign into a global debate. What I never realized until I dug into this is how similar their strategies really were. Both knew that every scandal generated headlines, and every headline kept them alive in the public imagination. In a world where fame fades overnight, controversy became their most reliable currency, and neither was afraid to spend it. Another shared parallel lies in the communities they touched. Both Marilyn and Madonna became gay icons, though in opposite ways. For Marilyn, her tragic vulnerability and outsider status made her a symbol of queer longing, a reminder of beauty crushed by a judgmental world. Her image was camped, celebrated, and reinterpreted in drag for decades. For Madonna, it was triumph instead of tragedy. She openly embraced gay fans, spoke out during the AIDS crisis, and made queer culture central to her music and performances. Her dancers, her collaborators, her art, all of it was saturated with LGBTQ representation. Yet, in both cases, their images became enshrined in LGBTQ history. Monroe as a martyr-like figure, Madonna as a defiant queen, and beyond that, both women reshaped cultural standards of beauty and celebrity. Marilyn set the archetype for the modern bombshell. Madonna reshaped the template for the female pop star. The impact wasn't just on fans, it was on the very industries they dominated. Think about it. Almost every blonde pop star after Madonna owes their look, directly or indirectly, to Marilyn. It's a lineage of influence that still hasn't ended. There's also something deeply moving about their connections to the LGBTQ community. Marilyn may never have spoken openly about it, but her image was embraced in queer spaces because she embodied the pain of performing an identity society forced upon you. Madonna flipped that narrative. She didn't just let herself be adopted by the gay community, she ran into their arms and said, "I'm with you." Her tours featured voguing, drag queens, and unapologetic celebrations of queer life, at a time when politicians were ignoring the AIDS crisis. When I compare them, I see two sides of the same coin, one symbolizing silent suffering, the other symbolizing loud defiance. And maybe that's why both of them endure so powerfully in queer history. They represented the full spectrum of that struggle. What fascinates me even more is how both women built businesses around their image. Marilyn was one of the first actresses to license her likeness, carefully monetizing her face and style beyond acting. She understood that her beauty was an asset that could extend into calendars, endorsements, and products. Madonna took this further, becoming a merchandising empire with perfumes, clothing lines, films, and tours. Both women turned themselves into brands decades before personal branding was even a concept, and both mastered the art of reinvention. Marilyn went from pinup girl to actress to serious performer, shifting her identity to fit Hollywood's changing needs. Madonna followed the same pattern on steroids, constantly reinventing herself with every album cycle. Virgin, dominatrix, spiritual guru, disco queen. Neither woman ever stood still. Reinvention wasn't just survival, it was domination. What's most striking is how they both treated their image as a business, not just an accident of fame. Marilyn may not have lived long enough to fully reap the benefits, but Madonna carried the blueprint forward, proving that a woman could be both an icon and a CEO of her own empire. I'll never forget realizing that Marilyn Monroe was one of the first stars to really monetize her image. Her calendars sold millions. Her likeness was everywhere, even long after her death. She laid the groundwork for the idea that a celebrity's face was more valuable than gold. Madonna took that idea and blew it up to unimaginable proportions. Concert tours became billion-dollar productions. Merchandising deals turned her into a one-woman economy. By the 1990s, Madonna wasn't just competing with other pop stars, she was competing with corporations, and she was winning. Both women understood something most of their peers never grasped. Fame isn't just about talent, it's about turning yourself into an empire, and they both did it brilliantly, though only one lived long enough to enjoy the full rewards. And finally, we arrive at the ultimate parallel: their endings. Marilyn's life ended in tragedy at just 36 years old, cementing her as a myth rather than a woman. She became the eternal symbol of fleeting beauty and doomed fame. Her story stopped abruptly, leaving endless questions and conspiracies behind. Madonna, on the other hand, pushed through decades of backlash, reinvention, and controversy, and emerged triumphant, a survivor who wrote her own ending. One became the cautionary tale, the other became the rewrite.